Please open your English textbooks to page 94. Today, we are going to read Chapter 8, Development. What is development? Human development. The development of a country is calculated by taking into account its wealth. For example, the average income per capita and other factors, such as life expectancy, the population's access to healthcare, the literacy rate, etc. Human development can be measured in different ways. Human Development Index, HDI. This was developed by the United Nations and is published annually. It evaluates social and economic aspects on a scale from 0, lowest human development, to 1, highest human development. The second index we use to gauge human development is called the Human Poverty Index, HPI. This measures social deprivation in 3 areas: life expectancy, adult illiteracy rate, and a decent standard of living. In developed countries, social exclusion is also measured. Countries according to their development. Strong economic and social differences allow us to classify countries into 3 groups. The 3 groups of countries according to their development are developed countries, emerging countries, and less developed countries. Developed countries. They have a high per capita income, which favors consumption and economic growth. They have advanced industries, modern infrastructures, and people have access to quality services. Emerging countries. They are acquiring a level of production and wealth which will enable them to join the group of developed countries. They are modernizing their economy through industrialization, agricultural transformation, and the development of services. Infrastructures and services are still deficient, and educational levels are low. They depend on more developed countries for technology and consumer goods. Less developed countries. They have a low per capita income and low levels of consumption. Infrastructure and services are scarce and unavailable to most inhabitants. Life expectancy and educational levels are low. The prospects for economic development in the near future are poor. Now please bring your attention to the glossary. Decent standard of living. Measurement of living conditions that takes into account access to drinking water, adequate nutrition, etc. External debt. Money that a country owes to other countries or international institutions. Social exclusion. Situation in which people are deprived of basic rights, housing, employment, etc. Okay, now if you would please turn the page to 95 and bring your attention to the top of the page, we have this beautifully colored map of the Human Development Index of the world. Countries with very high human development, their HDI is above 0.796. Countries with high human development, their HDI is between 0.796 and 0.712. Countries with medium human development, their HDI is between 0.712 and 0.536. Countries with low human development, their HDI is below 0.536. Below the map, we have the causes of economic underdevelopment. There are several factors that slow down a country's growth. The colonial legacy. Far fewer countries are former colonies. Following independence, their economies were underdeveloped, and the new states faced political problems like corruption, authoritarian rule, and instability. The technological gap. Less developed countries do not have their own technology. Their production is outdated. Foreign companies control the activities which generate economic growth. Population. In less developed countries, the population grows at a faster rate than access to resources. Disease and famine mean that some adults can't work, so their children have to do their jobs. External debt. Less developed countries cannot repay their external debt. Therefore, they ask for new credits, which reduces their investment in the economy. They overexploit their natural resources. They reduce public spending on basic services. Armed conflicts. Wars result in human and economic loss. And the young workforce needed for the recovery and development of the country is reduced. Okay, part 2, extreme poverty and hunger. What is extreme poverty? Extreme poverty affects people who cannot meet their basic needs, such as access to drinking water, food, and healthcare. It usually refers to people whose income is less than $1.25 a day. Affected groups. Elderly people, women, and children are the most affected groups. They suffer from malnutrition and are at greater risk of disease. They do not have access to basic health care. Children do not have access to education. Characteristics of affected regions. Lack of health and educational services, making access to productive work difficult. The overexploitation of natural resources has caused serious damage to the environment. Wars and political corruption have resulted in the misuse of public resources and a decrease in private investment. And lastly, evolution. The number of people living in extreme poverty has fallen from 1.9 billion in 1990 to 1.2 billion in 2010. There are contrasts between regions. In countries in sub-Saharan Africa, almost half of the population lives in extreme poverty. The rate is much lower in developed countries. Eradicating extreme poverty is the first of the United Nations Millennium Development Goals. Let's take a look at those goals. Number 1, to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. Number 2, to achieve universal primary education. Number 3, to promote gender equality. Number 4, to reduce child mortality. Number 5, to improve maternal health. Number 6, to combat HIV and AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. Number 7, to ensure environmental sustainability. Number 8, to develop a global partnership for development. Okay, let's please turn to the final page, page 97. World famine. Around 870 million people on the planet, most of whom live in less developed countries, are affected by famine. In less developed countries, 1 in 6 children under the age of 5 is underweight. The percentage of people who suffer from malnutrition has decreased from 23.2% between 1990 and 1992 to 14.9% between 2010 and 2012. This trend has continued despite the economic crisis and the rise in food prices. However, as the economic situation of poor families has worsened, the rate of this decrease has slowed down. Advances in the fight against famine have been most effective in Asia, the Caucasus region, and Latin America, while progress has been slower in Africa and Oceania. Access to drinking water. Water is a limited resource that must be taken care of and preserved. Around 900 million people in the world do not have access to clean drinking water. The consumption of contaminated water causes around 1.5 million deaths per year. In less developed countries, 70% of industrial waste is dumped into water intended for human consumption. This contributes to an increased risk of disease. Finally, let's review the glossary. Drinking water. Water that is suitable for human consumption. Malnutrition. Condition resulting from a diet of less than 2,100 calories per day. Millennium Development Goals. Objectives proposed by the United Nations for Human Development. They include eradicating extreme poverty and hunger, achieving universal primary education, promoting gender equality, reducing the infant mortality rate, improving maternal health, combating HIV and other diseases, ensuring environmental sustainability, and developing a global alliance for development.